Hey, well, what's up, Colliders? Welcome back to the Collision Live. Daniel here, as always, joined at the desk by the Fozzie Bear to my Gonzo, Mr. Sam Kemp.
Always a pleasure to be here, Daniel. Never know what you're going to say in those intros.
Yeah,
we're kind of running out
we're
of
on
all
episode 22. I don't know how many more famous
polite ones there
duos we got, but I will start scraping the bottom of that barrel and drag that joke out as long as I can. But hey, it's an interesting week. There were some kind of news stories and things that in pop culture that were kind of interesting, but I thought we'd take more of a general. We've been doing focus more on kind of specific controversies and stuff, and
Yeah.
I think we're both kind of a little just tired of controversies, and just thought we could deal with some other issues. So again, I think we have a couple interesting topics and things to talk about today. Again, if you haven't joined us before at the Collision Live, this is our weekly show where we talk about Christianity and culture and kind of the collision and the relationship between the two, and how do we kind of navigate this and contribute to and critique this culture that we're immersed in as Christians that Christ sends us into. So I think let's jump right into the first. The first thing that I wanted us to talk about, and this is actually based on something that I tweeted. I hope that it's not too self-serving. But I sent a tweet. Again, this wasn't necessarily just like a hot take. This is something that I'd been seeing some stuff throughout the week. Even the sermon we heard at our home church on Sunday got me thinking about this. So I tweeted this out, and I thought it'd be, now that I have Sam here to help me and give me the definitive answer and through this. But I said,
that's what I'm here for.
I said, so much Christian music, books, and any kind of Christian art today seems to exist simply as a form of spiritual self-help, always comforting, never challenging, always affirming, never questioning, picking us up off the ground, never sending us down to our knees, encouraging complacency, but rarely growth. So again, this is something that I've been kind of wrestling with this a bit over the years, but as a sort of this, listening to some of the ads on like Christian radio or, through like a Christian bookstore, hearing people talk about kind of Christian art, you almost get a sense, like the words like safe gets thrown out a lot. I know growing up, the Christian radio station back home was, their motto was safe and fun for the whole family. The word like uplifting or encouraging, all these words that are obviously good words. Nothing wrong with being encouraged or uplifted by music. I guess the question that I thought we could talk about, again, if you guys are joining us live, we'd love to hear some other perspectives on as well, is as sort of Christian community and artists, have we narrowed and kind of limited the scope, kind of the purpose of what art can do, far too small? Have we kind of closed the gates, the borders, and where all art ends up sort of being this sort of, comforting blanket that we put upon us to escape from the realities? Or, should art do more? And if so, like in what ways do you think we could shake this up?
Yeah, I think perhaps like in general, it is probably too comforting, and I think it errs on that side. I would say in general, like 9 times out of 10, the songs, the movies, the art in general, the books are going to be more about sort of this self-help, this encouragement, this sort of preaching to the choir kind of mentality. And we've talked about this even just like with a lot of the movies, the Christian movies that come out. Again, like just to sort of generalize, and there are exceptions to this, but they're more about sort of making all the Christians like feel better in some way, or be encouraged that there's Christians out there making Christian movies, like less to do with the movie, more to do with like what it represents in culture, and not so much the art form itself. It's sort of like,
yeah, because I know you're
not alone, and that sort of helps. And even with the songs, it's all about powerful and uplifting songs, and I guess that, there's not to get down into the weeds too much, but there's worship, what we would call worship music, and then I think there's just sort of this Christian contemporary music, which isn't necessarily worship music, but it's just sort of it's this self-helpy, feel nice
Yeah, that's
type
probably a
of
good
music.
distinction too. Again, with any of this culture stuff, again, if you guys have been following, our discussions over the last 22 episodes we've been doing this, it's never as simplistic as we have to. There's different reasons and purposes for Christian art.
Right.
There's people you come at it at different times in your life, times of the day, different needs. It can, it impacts people differently. So, anything is kind of generalized. But I remember walking out of or talking to some people after they'd just seen a Christian, kind of a faith-based movie, and they were just raving. It was so powerful. It was so, and I remember thinking, they have every right to feel that way. It's not like my opinion trumps their own experience. But I remember it sort of when what was it powerful? Like what, are you different walking out of the theater? Do you think differently? Do you feel different? Did it challenge you in any way, or is it powerful just because it made you feel good? Like, hey, this told me I'm going to be okay.
This affirmed everything that I already believed.
Yeah, it didn't make me
Boy, don't I
question
feel
anything.
nice.
It didn't make me it didn't kind of break me. And you get, that's a biblical, Ecclesiastes. There's a time for death, time for life, time to tear down, time to build up. This is biblical. Just read anything in Scripture. There's times where we need to be encouraged as the church, and there's times when I feel like we need to be kind of beat down. Kind of a classic example that I use. It's one of the most famous works of art, at least in recent memory, and it's probably one of the most hated and loathed by Christians. It's a photograph. It's called Emerson's. Some of you guys are probably familiar with it. I don't know how familiar you are with this.
I know it. I'm not.
Yeah, it has a more crude name, which you can look up, which we'll keep it family friendly here at the Collision Live. But this is this photograph has been vandalized, and wherever it's being displayed, exhibited, Christians have broken in and shattered the glass. And again, if you don't know what the picture is, this is like a crucifix, that you put on your wall. I have one upstairs in my office that I got when I visited the Vatican, and it's submerged, immersed in a canister of the artist, the photographer's own urine. And then with lighting and some editing, he took a picture. And again, this has been because of that. It's been taken as a very offensive attack on Christianity. And I know I'm somewhat in the minority, but this is actually for me, one of the most kind of powerful works, in recent times of Christian art. I think it, and the artist himself has said, it's the fact that you feel something outrage is kind of the point. He's kind of saying, how much we get outraged that we're defiling this store-bought symbolic thing of Christ. How much more should we take seriously our own sin, what we've done? And again, I've even this thought, even knowing that it's you're looking through someone else's urine, there's beauty in that. There's beauty in the picture. It's sort of this, even with all the filth of kind of humanity, that image of Christ on the cross shining through is beautiful. And again, I think we don't need to get too deep into that, but I thought I'd throw that up as an example. That again, this isn't a picture necessarily at first that would encourage you. Maybe it would make you feel angry or make you reevaluate things. But the kind of the point for me is, but it makes you think. It makes you angry. It makes you kind of ponder things, wonder, kind of evaluate. Like, what do you think? Is that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think first of all, there's so many layers to it, and I think anything that has layers. I'll make up just a blanket statement. Like, things that have layers, I think are super interesting, because it's like, on the one hand, it's offensive, and how could you? That's grotesque, and you call that art. But then on the other hand, like, when you think about it, like, there's just so much symbolism there, and it really reflects more of the viewer of that art than the art itself. I'm sure it wasn't necessarily that difficult to create. Like, it wasn't, someone spent,
You can do it, make your own home.
Yeah, you could DIY, this artwork in a sense. Not to demean the artist, but simply to say it wasn't a particularly skillful piece of artwork in the same sense that,
it's not the Sistine Chapel or something.
Yeah, or you spent half your life chiseling this from marble or something, and it's just captivating. But I just think it's such a commentary on you could say even just the state of the church today. You know, you could look at that, and that you could say that that's a reflection of Christianity today in the West, for example. Like there's so many
Yeah, and
there's so
that's
many places that you could take this,
and
and
if you're kind of like trying to think, and again, there's obviously there are Christian artists that are doing stuff, that isn't simplistic or overly, but I
right.
think if you just sort of like in
Let's say,
general, the
let's say
tendency is
mainstream
kind of
Christian art.
mainstream is things like that picture kind of make me think like, what's the last song I heard on the Christian radio that either left me broken or left me like days later still thinking about some of the you know is it just sort of a like a therapeutic drug almost of
Yeah.
you turn it on, it's gonna make you feel good about yourself, and then you go out throughout your day.
Yeah.
And
Well,
again,
and I think like one instance of that I think would be like, I think that the band Casting Crowns does this sometimes with their music, where it's challenging the church in some way, like not to just be complacent or whatever it is. And so I would say that's maybe one artist group that isn't just like feel, and I'm sure they have feel good songs. I don't know their
Yeah.
entire catalog, but there was a song I heard recently that was sort of challenging, like taking your faith outside of your Sunday service and that kind of stuff. And so I think sometimes there are artists that do that.
Yeah, and again, just to make sure that we're not um, being misinterpreted or misstating it, like there's a there's a lot of value in encouraging and uplifting.
Right.
There's lots of times when it's like a bath at the end of the day. You just want to like,
Yeah.
you need that. You've been covered in filth all day. You're tired. It's really not a critique of the fact that Christian radio should just leave you depressed and leave you hating your life and questioning truth. And
Yeah.
it's just that it can do more. And I think sometimes we end up kind of praising Christian art in a very self-serving manner, that it just made us feel good, but it's actually not us asking or demanding anything of us.
And I think the classic perhaps example is like the Thomas Kincaid. I think it's Thomas Kincaid, the artist who just paints these sort of pastoral, just, lots of Christians I think have copies of his art that is just this real pleasant, a meadow, and it's all this really, really nice artwork. It's just pleasant. It's never challenging, and that's okay. Like you can have unchallenging art, but I think there needs to occasionally be the crucifix in a jar of urine that can kind of wake you up from perhaps a complacency, or just force you to confront some realities.
Yeah, again, this is obviously not a Christian, and we can move on to maybe to the next thing. But like I remember like when the movie Joker came out, was it last year, the year before? Obviously it was a controversial. Obviously you wouldn't say that's like a faith-based movie or anything, but I remember like I left the theater feeling kind of just down, and it's not a feel-good movie. And again, as time has gone on, I less and less think highly of that film. But I remember when that came out, there's kind of Christian communities, critics saying, critiquing it, saying, a film needs to have a kind of a hopeful thing at the end. Like it, as a Christian, you can't just have the down part. Like in sort of this sense that any experience has to end on this. And I remember just sort of wondering, is that true though? Like, do you?
No, it's definitely not true.
Obviously, if you're only immersed in that kind of stuff, that is a problem. But I think you experience different art, different movies. You're surrounded by it. That those kind of add together, and I think it's okay for at moments in time just to focus on one, just to lament and kind of weep for the world without having to end on a super high note. You can kind of leave that.
Yeah.
So again, it's sort of, I think, a challenge for Christian artists, but also just as kind of consumers of culture and art, just to, not that you have to just go buy stuff that makes you unhappy, but that it can do more. And I think the power of art is in causing us to grow. And if it's not doing that, then I think we're missing some of what art can do. Another thing I wanted us to talk about again, it's not necessarily and again, if you guys are watching this back or if you didn't join us live, let us know. And also, be curious if there's a specific artwork or song or Christian thing that has made you kind of bothered and rethinking things and growing. But in other news, we just went to space.
Not just space.
Yeah.
We landed on Mars.
We landed on Mars. Obviously,
Again.
We did not do that, but we vicariously through videos and through following Twitter. But we went to, and again, it's crazy because I feel like this should be huge. Like it
is,
and like obviously it is. People are talking about it as headlines and stuff, but like it almost like seems like people just sort of have moved past the fact. Like it hasn't resonated. Like,
it's like we landed on Mars, but did you see what Ted Cruz did?
yeah. But what about those Muppets? We kind of move on to the next thing. And I thought, we just went to space.
Yeah,
There's this thing to talk about
successfully too. And
because it's crazy. And so I thought we could just, obviously we don't land on Mars that often, but if you have been going to movie theaters and watching movies over the years, we have gone to space cinematically.
Many times.
And just sort of, what is it about kind of space movies? It seems like there's always, every year there's a bunch of them, or at least one, whether we're going to space or the aliens are coming from space to take over the world.
Yeah.
But what is it about that makes a good space movie? And maybe what are some of your favorite or things that just come to mind of like?
Well, I think there needs to be an element of mystery, I think, in space movies, or just like sort of awe-inspiring. I think of like Gravity was just sort of just this like crazy, like you felt like you were in space, and it was just so disorienting, but also beautifully shot, and like you just see these amazing images of space, and looking back at Earth, and you really felt sort of that you were there in space. And then movies like Interstellar come to mind, where it's just sort of like it's just dealing with the vastness and just like mind-blowing nature of the universe.
I was thinking I can't do the McConaughey voice, but I've been thinking with landing on Mars, like that line again. I don't know the quote verbatim, but where he's we used to look up to the stars, and now we just look at the dust. I've been thinking about that just as our culture, like
we've sort of lost that wonder a bit, and hopefully landing on Mars again and successfully can sort of reignite some of that wonder. And I think it's also space is the great unknown, right? Like we know lots of things about it, but we know so little. And it's just this vast expanse that, it's the great frontier in some ways. And I would say to a lesser extent, so is like deep ocean exploration.
Yeah, it's kind of
If you look at the animals that are photographed, on the ocean floor, it's like, did that come from space, or
those are pretty much,
or have they been there for a long time? So I think it's sort of that taps into this sort of that exploratory roots of
and that's
humanity.
the word for me. Again, if you guys are watching, let us know some of your favorite space movies. But I think the exploration to me is what makes a good. And that's why I would even say like something like Star Wars isn't necessarily a great space movie. Obviously, it's a flawless, best movie ever made. But as far as and it's in space. But it's a fantasy.
Space isn't. It's almost a throw. Like it didn't have to necessarily.
Yeah, it gets bizarre, and there's aliens, and it is sort of this foreign world. But you don't have that that kind of exploration. You kind of even do in Solo, which I know a lot of people were not a fan of that as a Star Wars movie. But when they're going through doing the Kessel Run, there's just that crazy alien thing out there. Like it felt like you're just there's crazy stuff on the fringes of.
So we have no idea about.
Yeah, and that's why again like I've beat this drum over and over and over, but like Alien is one of my favorite movies of all time, and it's because of that. It's until the sequels undid it. Like they didn't explain really what happened. You just sort of drop in this thing crazy in space, you leave. And it's just sort of like there's more out to out there that we don't even understand.
And I think that's one of my favorite. I think one of the best ways to end a movie is is to not bring everything into a nice, tidy conclusion. I think that's fine, and obviously lots of movies in that way, and lots of people appreciate that kind of an ending to a movie. But I think, it makes me think of like Inception or something, that there's a bit of doubt as to what happens next.
Yeah, because we did.
And it at least leaves that different pathways as an option at the end of a film, and I think those are the films that stick with us, because it's like you go home and you're talking to your friends that you saw the movie with or whatever, and it's like, well, do you think it's possible that that this was actually what happened? And so I think it causes the art to linger with you for longer than the duration of.
Yeah, because probably the most recent space movie that we saw together, Ad Astra with Brad Pitt. I remember one of our critiques of that movie is that it had a perfect place to end in sort of that unknown wonder of space, and then they kind of tacked on
and it was just like
the Hollywood ending where it tied everything in a neat bow. And I guess maybe two questions for you, but one is this sort of, as a Christian, what value is there to that? Like what value, obviously with real space, there's looking up to the stars, there's natural revelation, some of that in the Bible, but is there value as a Christian just to view some of these sort of exploratory, the wonders of space,
Well, I think it's fundamentally human to want to explore. I mean, like, I think on a very deep level, we want to explore. Like, we want to see, like, we don't like unknowns in some way. And so in some way we're trying to discover what it is we don't yet know. And so I think that's a fundamentally human experience or posture, if you will. And so I think that's what's so interesting about it, is because you get to kind of explore that sort of through the work of an artist in a movie. And I think that's incredibly fun and exciting. And so I think that's one of the main appeals of space movies.
Yeah, it makes you feel, especially obviously it's different if you're like watching it on an iPad on an airplane or something. But I can see like Ad Astra or some of those movies like in the big Dolby IMAX kind of screens.
Yeah.
There's always that kind of shot, that scene where it's just black and you see like a tiny little like spacecraft. And I think as a Christian moment, not necessarily that's gonna convert someone and sitting in the theater to to an awareness of that they need a savior in Jesus, but I think it does awaken some of that kind of wonder of we are small, there is stuff out there that's kind of bigger than we are, and I think it's healthy to whether the movie is made by a Christian or purpose for that. I think this being exposed to real space does that, but I think for those of us that don't get the opportunity to go into space, I think that's one of the ways that cinema can kind of reflect God even in ways that we might not think. Or maybe a final question on this topic. I was curious to see what you would think. Do you think, again, I know people are excited about this Mars thing, but it seems like a lot of people are just moving right past it and getting back to our earthly controversies.
Back to the Kardashians.
Let's move on. But do you think like space, if we landed on Mars 30, 40 years ago, and had we're still able to see the footage and stuff, but without all these sci-fi space movies, do you think that kind of the wonder of that would be greater? Like, does science fiction movies awaken sort of more interest, or does it almost like desensitize us to well, we've seen spaceships fly through space and dogfight and land on different planets? Like, does it lessen that because we've seen it?
I don't think so.
Or is it just our culture doesn't?
I don't think it. Like, I don't think because I've seen so many movies about space that I'm like, oh, okay, there's a rover on Mars.
Yeah, and if you guys don't know, Sam's like a space nut. Like I always get.
I wouldn't say nut.
Well, some might use the word nut. Fanatic, perhaps, but I always get the text message. Like, hey, NASA's launching a thing. Like, this o'clock. Sam keeps me up with the latest.
Well, I happen to see things and it's this is interesting. Like, we just touched down on Mars. Like, again, successfully, and this one has audio, so you can go and listen to the red planet,
and
which I think is.
and hear the distant alien communication voices.
You can hear the distant dinosaur like screeching that everyone just wants to gloss over and say it was a malfunction.
Yeah, but again, I think that I don't think there's necessarily some definitive answer to that, but it is sort of that give and take of, I think cinema on the one hand can expose us in a positive sense and make us aware and get excitement for not just space but any of that kind of exploration or just human experience.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it can also kind of water it down to where like it's done that with violence, where
Right.
you see death tolls or whatever, and if you've grown up just watching movies where people just gunning people down left and right, it does desensitize it to a bit where it's
yeah, I mean, I think that's why I always like, if I'm traveling someplace where it's like there's not a lot of light pollution, like it's hard to replicate just looking up at the night sky when there's like no light pollution and you can just see tons and tons of stars. And so I think that is still just very awe-inspiring. And so I think when you see like, we're actually like, going to these places, it's not just sort of a Hollywood movie about what it might be like there. Like, no, we're actually there. I think I don't know. I think it's way more exciting. And I think Hollywood and movies about space, I think probably mostly just excite the imagination to what could happen. And so I think although, I mean, there is some desensitizing, like, oh yeah, I've seen a space station blow up and like, no big deal, whatever. But I think it also just says like this, like the potential, the possibilities that still lie ahead of us. And as far as, these sorts of explorations go, I think is a net good.
Yeah, again, I definitely think there's
Tell us
value.
what you think.
And I think we can probably both agree that when Dune comes out later this year, it might be the greatest space movie ever made.
It's possible.
Inspired by Mars, so we'll see if it matches up with what the rover has been capturing.
Yeah.
So this week got a collision, and not a whole lot of different things, but one thing I encourage you guys to check out. We released a video. We haven't done a cultural conversations video, and it had been a while. These are just sort of short, 4, 5, 6 minute videos where we just talk about some kind of issue, some question in kind of in culture. And again, this was one that I was passionate about as an artist, as a writer myself. Is just, what does he care about our human art? Is he above that, beyond that?
Yeah.
Is our creativity just sort of trivial, something we do on the side as opposed to important things that we do as Christians? So again, I encourage you to check that. It's on the YouTube channel. I'll drop a link in the description area of this video. Again, this is a couple of minutes where I just share, kind of walk through the Bible as some insights of, hey, there's actually some exciting, truth in the Bible about what God thinks of creativity and art. So again, I encourage you to check that out. Culture conversations. Anything you've been noticing?
Well, as a matter of fact, just before we went live, I was reading about something that I find super interesting. It's sort of the intersection of new technology, robotics, and art. And so Mischief, which is like an internet art group, it's without any of the vowels, so it's MSCHF. They're doing this thing called Spots Rampage tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So you can go to their website and you have a chance to remotely operate Spot, which is, if you don't know what Spot it is, a robotic dog created by Boston Dynamics. You've probably seen videos of them on the internet. And you can potentially remotely control it, and they've attached a paintball gun to the top of it. And so it's a really, like, to me, this is like, it's so meta, but it's like, it's art commentating on sort of the state of, AI and computing and robotics, and it's asking, I think it's sort of asking some very interesting ethical questions, and it's just sort of all these, again, it goes back to the layers. And so I don't know, maybe check it out. Like, it's just really, really fascinating to me that an art group would do this, and like, it's just so like next level in some ways.
Yeah, and again, even this goes back to what we were talking about as far as like I think art and the sort of experimenting, playing around with art can, you know, not everything will necessarily just change your life, but it makes you think. It makes you rethink kind of how we are as humans, what we're doing. So maybe we'll drop a link in the description for that too. Just maybe it'll give you some new.
And on a lighter note, I would just say that we got 2 trailers for a couple of new movies coming out. One is Mortal Kombat. The other is Cruella. And again, all I will say is the nostalgia train is still going strong.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I'll leave it at that.
Remember those cute puppies? Or what if they were? They
What
weren't
if we
really
did
in the movie, and it was actually dark and gritty.
What if we did an origin story?
Again, I think I tweeted out this Cruella seems like a bad idea Disney had like 10 years ago and just found in like a folder somewhere. Oh yeah, we were gonna make this with Maleficent. Let's just release it on Disney Plus. But again, maybe it will be awesome, and I'll eat my words, but I doubt it. A couple things I've sort of noticed. One, I don't want to get into. Again, I'm worn out from all the controversies and stuff, but one slight kind of pet peeve that people are freaking out about the Muppets. They should freak out about the Muppets because the Muppet Show is awesome.
I know.
The Muppets are awesome, and they are now like 180 episodes, I think, on Disney Plus.
Oh boy, I know what I'm doing for the rest of this week.
Yeah. So Sam will have an episode by episode review of that up on the channel soon.
I'll be live streaming my reaction.
But again, besides the excitement that comes from the Muppets coming, Disney Plus, we've talked about this on the show. There are disclaimers that they've been adding to a bunch of their shows that basically they play for a few seconds before the show, and it's on the when you're selecting it on their platform. It just kind of says, hey, there are depictions of cultural things and appropriations that that aren't appropriate now, but we're leaving the art untouched, but we just want to make you aware that there are things that might be offensive today and yada yada. And again, we've kind of talked about that, whether that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but the discussion surrounding that, kind of within Christian circles especially, is kind of the Muppets are canceled. They're canceling everything. They canceled Kermit. And again, some notable people have been tweeting this and headlines. And I guess my caveat to that, I don't know why it bothers me so much. I think it's just because I'm a word person. But again, some of these buzzwords, the more you use them, the less they mean.
Yeah.
And, because you can critique that and say, hey, I don't think they should have these disclaimers. Let comedy be comedy. They're puppets. But by definition, like the Muppets had the entire 180 episodes uploaded to the most popular growing streaming platform in the world. Like that's the opposite of cancel culture. They're more available and exposed today than they were last week. So it's not canceled. Not everything, cancel culture is terrible. We've talked about that.
There's plenty of things that have been canceled that it's worth getting upset about, that like you don't need to like invent more.
Yeah, but everything that we dislike isn't cancel culture. It's not just, they canceled Kermit. No, they didn't. They actually gave us hours and hours
everything
of Kermit.
you dislike isn't also violence. And so like,
yeah, because we do that with, even racist, there's racism in the world, but not everything you dislike is racist. We need to be careful with the, words do matter. So again, that was just my soapbox I got off of.
Yeah. But how do you really feel about it?
How do I really feel? I feel better now that I've released that. But one last thing that I noticed, Steve Irwin, the Crocodile Hunter. I don't know if you were a Crocodile Hunter guy. Crikey. He yesterday would have been his 59th birthday, 59th birthday.
Wow.
I forget now. Does Mander know how many years ago he died? Nope. Put our camera person on the spot. Too soon. That is the proper answer. Again, he died tragically. I would say 5-6 years ago. Maybe
I think it's been longer. I think it's probably been 10 years.
Maybe 10 years. Man, but people were celebrating him, and again, I just thought I was trying to think of sort of what some of the equivalents of him. Like he's kind of like a Mr. Rogers in a way, where he was this, maybe not as influential, but he was this. He was passion amazing. And positivity.
And what's amazing is his son has really taken that.
Yeah, and his daughter too. Like they have their. He actually he was killed while on gathering footage to launch his daughter's show, which is now a show. So again, they're kind of carrying on the torch for that. But one of the things that stood out to me, he's just a positive guy that was passionate about something. But it contrasted a bit to how people deal with some of these issues, like the real preaching and environmental and like he supported all that. He was very much about the environment and protecting our planet and the animals. But like if you watch his show and like, the way he talked, it was never, you should kind of pointing the finger at, we need to, we're
Put
burning
down your
the
plastic fork and listen up.
Yeah, like he was just so passionate and excited about it.
Well, he was like his enthusiasm for the natural world was contagious.
Yeah.
And I think we need more people like that. And it's been almost 15 years since his death.
Wow.
2006.
That's
crazy.
But yeah, as that, there is such a contrast. And I think this, the way he kind of did his show, I think is sort of like a model for how you can impact the world, impact the culture through kind of your art, through your passion, through your kind of through media in a way that's not just whacking you over the head with your message, but it's just, hey, this is something that's awesome. I think it's awesome. You probably should too. I'm going to show you why it's awesome. And again, I think there's tons of parallels you can draw for not just environment, but just Christianity and some of these things. So again, RIP to a legend. I can't believe it's been that long. But any other kind of final thoughts for us as we're?
No. I think I'm all thought out.
You're all thought out. Well, again, guys, if you guys are watching this back at a later time, if you guys watched us live, thanks again for joining us. We always appreciate any comments, and again, if you're watching this back live, let us know. Well, we read through the comments, and we'd love to talk about some of that. But again, follow the space rover. Go listen to what it sounds like on Mars. Prepare for the alien invasion. Stay safe. Have a great week, and continue to collide with your world for Christ.